How's it going, everybody? Today I am extra grizzled of the face because I'm going to be covering an extra grizzled issue of Nintendo Power. And I am of course talking about the Weapon Lord issue, which also contains this game called Earthbound. I don't know, never heard of it. But yeah, check this guy out. He's got a giant stone mallet. He's got just general grizzle. Very impressive. And then on the back, you've got this Big with the Games ad. This is actually when Nintendo was kind of going through their attitude phase. They were up against the Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation. And both of those companies and systems were kind of bringing the attitude, if you will, in their advertising. Whereas Nintendo was viewed by a lot of people as being, you know, the kids company or the old company. I know those two things are kind of contrary to each other, but either way, Nintendo had a little bit of ground to make up in the advertising department. Even though they had the best system and the best games in 1995, apologies to Sega Genesis fans out there, but the Super NES had pretty much an unbeatable lineup. And this is actually a good illustration of that. But they had to really kind of pick it up with the advertising, give us more tude, if you will, like this guy body surfing. And it says over here, he's the guy who snaked the latest issue of Nintendo Power. I don't know what that means. He snaked an issue, so they're body surfing him because he didn't subscribe. I don't know. We need to like get on Urban Dictionary and find out the definition of snaked. What does it mean to snake an issue? Anyway, so we've got the table of contents. Look at the tude. I mean, we've covered issues from 1995 before, but just check out the amount of attitude in these pages. Just the colors and the all in your face. It's crazy. The project is a reality, the Ultra 64, and we're going to take our first look at that, I believe. And then we've got Killer Instinct, another high-tech app that Nintendo was bringing us at the time. What's the month and date on this, you ask? June 1995. June. So fairly early in the year. We're still about a year away from the N64. Let's check out the letters section. Any good letters this month? No. The Super NES Top 20 this month. Donkey Kong Country, number 1. Last month, also number 1. Number 2 is Final Fantasy 3. Or 6, as we now call it. Back then it was 3, but everybody knows that. I don't have to go into that. Last month, it was also 2. So we're seeing a kind of a steadiness of the charts here, where each month they kind of, you know, maintain their positions. Number 3, Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Last month, also number 3. Super Metroid, number 4. Last month, also number 4. You get the idea. Matter of fact, they go all the way down to number 7, Mega Man X2, which was last month, also number 7. After that, you have Secret of Mana, which has actually gained 3 spots from the previous month. It's gone from 11 to 8. Anyway, you guys don't care about that, probably. But I just think it's interesting that we've kind of settled into a routine of which games are on top during this era. Game Boy Top 10, you've got Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, number 1. Last month, also number 1. Great. So we're going to move on. Oh boy, here we go. This is it. This is what I've been waiting for. This is the reason why I want to cover this particular issue today. Besides that, I am looking grizzled, and so is this gentleman right here. That's a big boy. That's a big boy right there. So this is the main reason I want to cover this issue. Earthbound. That's right, Earthbound. The game. This game is very special. As far as RPGs go, it's kind of an average RPG in terms of gameplay. It has some neat innovations like the rolling hit point meters, stuff like that. But in the grand scheme of things, it wouldn't stand out that much as an RPG if it weren't for all the heart and soul that went into this game. It's a very special game made by a very special developer named Shigesato. I think it's Shigesato. I'm probably getting this wrong. I'm sorry. Shigesato Itoi, I believe is his name. At this point in time, he was age 37, which means now he's 59, and that sucks to think about, you know. Everybody's older now, but regardless, this is a very special game. It means a lot to a lot of people, and I'm glad that I'm getting to read the coverage of it in Nintendo Power. Now, one thing that's worth noting is that the Nintendo Power coverage of this game makes it look super quirky, just like bizarre and weird. They didn't really convey the heart and soul that you find in this game. Little things like Ness remembering being a baby when he walks into that one room with the luminescent moss on the walls. Just little moments like that that just kind of get you right here. Or right here, actually, is where your heart is. But Nintendo, they basically just focused on the quirks and the idiosyncrasies of the game. I like that they use this exhibit structure where they have all these screenshots of the game, Exhibit 1, Exhibit 2. That's kind of an interesting way to take a look at the game. It's different from the way they cover most games. So you've got all the exhibits, you've got the different worlds that you visit. They're not worlds so much as like zones. You know, you've got Annette, Tucson, Winters, 3 Dusty Dunes. Notice how the first 3 towns, Onette, Tucson, and Threed. Not subtle, but that's cool. Winters is the 4th town, I believe, if you want to count it as such. But no, Forsythe's the 4th town. Anyway, Winters is, I believe, the 5th town. So they kind of dropped the number scheme for that. But anyway, so we've got some very cool exhibits. I really like this screenshot right here of the UFO taking off from the laboratory. I remember playing the game and being absolutely blown away by the music that plays when you fly in the UFO. And you only get to fly in the UFO a couple times, if I remember correctly. Just a few times during the game. But that music that plays for like a minute each time is just, it's awesome. And I remember saving the game right before boarding the UFO just so that I could hear that music more. I would reload the save and I'd jump back in the UFO, fly off, listen to the music for about a minute, reset. I actually did that because I like the music so much. I feel like video game music can be an amazing component of the art, and I wish that more modern games had the kind of memorable soundtracks that we got in this era on the Super NES. So here we've got Forsyth, which is actually a picture of New York City. World Trade Center towers still standing. Dalalam, I believe it's pronounced, or maybe it's Dalam, I don't know. The Indian themed zone was actually one of my favorites when I played this game. And finally, we've got, whoa, I just want to say, this jock dude over here who's standing by the taxi, he looks just like PC Principal from South Park. Isn't that weird? So finally, the coverage ends with Scaraba, Deep Darkness and the Lost Underworld. And I love that each of these areas is accompanied by a postcard to Mom and Dad with a picture of that particular area. And just a quick little blurb, presumably from Ness, the main character. For Scaraba, you've got the Sphinx here, and it says, "Dear Mom and Dad, covered with camel hickeys, otherwise healthy. Climbed pyramid, Sphinx in sad shape. Love, Ness." So yeah, he writes little notes to his parents. Really, it's his mom though, because his dad's off working somewhere, you know. Lost Underworld. Dear parents, nearing the end, feel destiny approaching. Could use a large olive and pepperoni pizza with extra cheese. Wish me luck, Ness. Yeah, now I'm hungry. So yeah, amazing game. Can you resist Earthbound? Not really. Not really. Not only does the game of Earthbound reek like some foul creature of the sewers. Yeah, see, that's the problem with Nintendo's advertising of Earthbound. is that they focused on the quirks, like I said before, but also they focused on like the game smelling bad or stinking. I don't know. They had these scratch and sniff cards that supposedly had scents from the game, and the ads for it would be like, "This game stinks." And as a kid, I didn't really think about that too much because I'm just like, "Oh, okay, they're just making a joke." But I feel like for a lot of people who didn't really know what they were looking at, they would have looked at that and been like, "This game stinks. Okay, well, I'm just not going to play it then." So I don't know. It seems like a kind of a bad advertising theme. Anyway, I love Earthbound. Love this coverage. Here we've got Weapon Lord. I believe this spider guy must be the boss of the game because he's not in the coverage otherwise. So he must be like the Goro of the game. I don't know. Weapon Lord is an interesting game. It's kind of a predecessor to the Soul Calibur series in a lot of ways. It's a brutal fighting game where you use swords and weapons, hammers, whatever, like giant Viking type weapons. So yeah, it's like a predecessor in a lot of ways for games that came later on. Weapon Lord itself never actually got a sequel as far as I know. This guy looks particularly badass. He's got like a hooked axe and a shield that's actually a gigantic skull. So yeah, very interesting game here. Never really heard anything about it after this though. I don't think it really hit it big or anything. But yeah, it's got some interesting character designs. This guy's quite beastly and rugged, and she's very sexy. This is about as much sex appeal as you ever saw in Nintendo Power. Here is Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the game. Wow, I didn't even know there was such a thing. It's for the Super NES, and you can play as all the major characters, which is great, except Quark. There's no Quark, but regardless, this seems like a good thing, but then you actually look at the game, and it looks pretty bland. Oof, yeah, this doesn't look good. It's got that kind of Alien 3 syndrome, where the levels are these massive mazes, and you kind of look at them and you can't make heads or tails of them, and there's just nothing compelling. It's like if these are the first 3 levels or first 4 levels, you can't tell them apart. They're all just like mazes of metal. It's just not compelling, and I can't even tell what kind of game it is. It's a side scroller, but as far as I can tell, you don't fight anything. You just kind of walk around these huge areas and find keys and turbo lifts. I don't know. Onward to the Epic Center, which was my favorite part of the issues at this point in time. We've got Tecmo enters the world of RPGs. Tecmo Secret of the Stars. Tecmo sees this game as an introductory RPG. The gameplay will remind veteran adventurers of the first Dragon Warrior game. Yeah. Anyway, I've played Tecmo Secret of the Stars, and I actually had a lot of fun with it, but it's like the most like basic, possibly ill-conceived RPG from 1995 on the Super NES, and it's actually really hard to believe that the game came out in 1995 because it looks like something from 1992 at best. But that's Tecmo Secret of the Stars. We've got something a little more important to talk about right now, and that is Chrono Trigger. Oh my god, my cup runneth over. First we have Earthbound, now we have this. This is our first look, as far as I know, our first look at Chrono Trigger in the pages of Nintendo Power. And wow, this is just something to behold. You've got shots of Magus's castle. You've got this really nice picture up here, this drawing of Chrono and Frog and Luca facing off with Magus, I guess on top of the tower. Just really good stuff. Actually, it looks like it's outside the tower, which is not accurate to the game, but we'll let that slide. I just want to note that this Chrono Trigger coverage actually spoils that Magus joins your party. There are three screenshots with Magus very clearly visible in your party. There's a shot of him in the epic ship, there's a shot of him walking through the forest, and there's a shot of him in the giant frog screenshot. Which, when I first read this, I remember thinking that the giant frog was a boss. And believe you me, I really wanted to play this game, just based on how colorful and interesting it looks. I just could not wait to play it at the time. It says here, Chrono Trigger makes dramatic improvements in graphics and sound over just about every previous traditional RPG, including Square's Final Fantasy III. That's true. I think I might prefer Final Fantasy III overall as a game because there's more depth to it. But this game really is more beautiful. At first glance, a lot of players make the mistake of thinking that Chrono Trigger follows in the footsteps of Secret of Mana. True story, the two games actually started out as the same game. And that's probably why there's this kind of genetic similarity between the two of them. Secret of Mana was being developed for the Nintendo PlayStation, the CD add-on, and they ended up having to scrap that version of Secret of Mana and then make a version for the regular Super NES that omitted a huge amount of content that we've never really gotten to the bottom of what we missed with Secret of Mana. But they took a lot of what they developed for the Sony system, for the CD system. They took a lot of the components that they weren't able to use in Secret of Mana, and supposedly they built off of that to create Chrono Trigger. So Chrono Trigger spun off of Secret of Mana DNA that was not used in Secret of Mana. But fast forward a couple of years, and the Super NES was able to generate a lot more power. And a game like Chrono Trigger could not have existed in the time of Secret of Mana, just a couple of years earlier. So yeah, the Super NES really evolved over the span of a few short years in terms of graphical fidelity and everything else. Here we've got Rise of the Phoenix, a game about war in ancient China. Very cool picture here. Let me just show you here. Very cool picture. It makes the game look awesome, but it's one of those kind of complicated strategy games where you have to manage resources. As a kid, it never really excited me. It just seemed like a lot of work, and you want to sit down and play a game and just kind of relax most of the time. But I know there's definitely a market for games like this, for sure. The strategy in Epic's Center, Epic Strategy, for this month is Illusion of Gaia, and they tell you where to find every single red jewel, all 50 of them. I actually used this when I played the game, and I got all of them. I found every red jewel. You fight a secret boss at the end, and it's a secret boss from Soul Blazer, which is the predecessor. But in any case, now we come to Killer Instinct, or KI as it was colloquially known. And here we have a couple of the characters here. It's all CGI, or SGI as it was called at the time. Silicon graphics. And this game is another game that just looks really off the wall, amazing for 1995. These graphics just absolutely blew everyone away. I mean, you've got one character that is basically the T-1000 from Terminator, except like a little bit icy, and that's Glacius. And he can melt down into a puddle and form knives and stabbing weapons with his hands. So that's kind of cool. I mean, there are a few really cool characters in Killer Instinct, and the graphics really were amazing for the time, but for some reason I just never got into it. I was a Mortal Kombat guy. In any case, Killer Instinct coming August 30th. At the time, I remember this, everybody thought that Killer Instinct was going to be for the Nintendo 64, which was still called the Ultra 64 at this point in time. Killer Instinct was going to be like one of the Ultra 64's launch games, probably. But then Nintendo realized that they could actually put it on the Super NES and get it out there a year earlier that way. So they had to scale it down quite a bit to fit it onto the Super NES, but they did it. And the results were pretty decent, actually. You know, the visuals were good. It was a smooth-looking game. So now we've got Dirt Tracks FX, which is a dirt bike game using the FX chip from Star Fox. Cool stuff, I suppose. Super Turrican 2. This is a game that I've always wanted to play. Like, I wanted to play this since 1995, and I've just never gotten around to it. It supposedly has gameplay very similar to Contra or Metroid in terms of the shooting, running and shooting kind of gameplay. But it's much shorter than a Metroid game. It's only like 4 stages. I mean, they're 4 robust stages, but they're 4 stages nonetheless. And yeah, I would still love to play this game. I'd love to play both of the Super Turricans. I've heard nothing but good things about them. They're kind of cult classics at this point on the Super NES. And as you can see, this game is very colorful. You've got like a fire level there, it's just very colorful, very exciting looking space game, basically, because you go to different planets and whatnot. Classified information this month has a speed code for Clay Fighter 2 Judgment Day. The sequel to Clay Fighter is called Clay Fighter 2 Judgment Day. I just want to note that Terminator 2 came out 4 years before this, and it was still a huge part of pop culture. You have this game named after it, you have the Killer Instinct character that I was just talking about, patterned after the T-1000. T2 stuck around in everyone's lexicons for a very long time, and maybe that's why it's one of my probably top 3 favorite movies of all time, and I don't think it'll ever get knocked out of that upper tier. So let's see, what else do we have in this issue? Anything else of note? Oh boy, Nintendo had a lot of irons in the fire at this point in time. They had the Ultra 64 on the way. They had Killer Instinct on the way. They had Donkey Kong Country 2 on the way. And then they had the Virtual Boy. See, they can't all be winners. They can't all be winners. Whew. The less said about the Virtual Boy, the better. But I will say that Nintendo Power was so powerful that they actually made the Virtual Boy look kind of enticing here. I don't know how, because you're looking at these screenshots and they look awful. They're just red and black. And you can't get any sense of the 3-dimensional aspects of it from looking at it on the page. Maybe the 3-dimensional look is better, I don't know. I never actually got to play the Virtual Boy. But looking at it on these pages, these screenshots are so unimpressive, especially compared to what the Super NES was doing at the time. And yet Nintendo somehow made this enticing. Just the way they talk about the Virtual Boy here, they make it sound like the system of the future. Take-Two. This is actually something that Nintendo Power did for a very short period of time, if I remember correctly, just like a few issues. They would take another look at a game that may have gone, relatively unnoticed previously, a game that came out in the past that they thought maybe people need to take another look at. So that's what Take-Two reviews are. They were usually just 2 pages, extremely bare bones, not a lot of imagination here, not a lot of like pictures and just bare bones. I don't know how else to put it. And these Take-Two reviews were bland. I usually just skipped over them because of their blandness. I understand the idea of wanting to give a second shot to a particular game of the past, but it just wasn't really my thing, I guess. I don't think it was a good idea. I don't think it was particularly appealing. I'm glad they got rid of it so quickly. In Counselor's Corner, we've got some Illusion of Gaia. Oh, here we go. We've got True Lies, which True Lies is like the hardest game on the Super NES. How do I defeat the terrorist in the restroom? So this is actually information that might be important for real life at this point in time. So definitely check out this issue. Get the pro tips on how to defeat terrorists in restrooms. I also want to note that this tip is brought to you by Noah Travis, or Travis Williams as he's called here. He was Noah Travis on AOL back in 1996, back when internet video game clubs were a very new thing. And Nintendo Power Online was like a bustling little community. And Noah Travis was the main Nintendo Power emissary who would interact with the masses on there. He seemed like a really cool, fun guy. I think I might have talked to him once or twice, very briefly, in chat rooms. But regardless, so Noah Travis, just a little fun fact. We've got Jungle Strike for the Game Boy. And this game, it's something that I believe I tried playing at a friend's house, and it was really hard to play. It just, like, the controls were really bad. So yeah, it looks good here though. You've got some really cool co-pilots here. This is the best part of the coverage of this game, the look at the co-pilots, because you can choose one to accompany you, and each one gives you different powers. So that's one cool aspect of the game. And the co-pilots all have funny personalities. You've got Mr. 3D. He's third in his class at the academy, and your third choice on a roster of 2 co-pilots. Leave this guy back at the base. You got Mr. Ego, who thinks he's hot, but he's merely average. You've got Face Man, who looks a lot like a young, what's his name, James Spader, a young James Spader. Grant Foster is a great gunner, but he has poor winching skills. You know, you gotta have those winching skills. Then you've got Annihilator. Rosalind is the only female co-pilot in the game. And then you've got, finally, Wild Bill. He's the best pilot in the business, and he wears a cool hat. Finally, we're getting to the end now. We've got the X-Band modem. Yes, an actual modem for the Super NES. You could use this to play online against other people for pretty much any multiplayer game at the time. And for me, that meant Mortal Kombat 2. And I really wanted to get an X-Band. Now, keep in mind, this was before I even knew what an internet was. I mean, the internet was around, I just didn't know a thing about it. So for me, the idea of playing video games against other kids from home, like other kids that lived in other parts of the country as well, was just a fantastic idea. And I remember being so excited to be able to get one of these and play Mortal Kombat 2 against other people from around the country. Now, I never got an X-Band, and as I recall, it had a very short run time in the grand scheme of things. It wasn't supported for very long, as far as I know, because I pretty much never heard a peep about it after like a month or so. So yeah, I never got an X-Band, never got to play Mortal Kombat 2 against people across the country, but nowadays, every system has that kind of capability. It's been completely normal to play games against people across the country for many years now. But there was a time when I was a kid where it was a completely novel concept, and I would have loved to have been able to do that. You know, if I were a kid growing up now, the idea of playing Mario Kart against people across the country or across the world even would just be so cool for me. I think it would be so awesome to be able to do that as a kid and play against other kids. And I wish that we had that when I was back in 1995 when I was growing up. Would have been so much fun for me. But you know what? There are going to be things in the future that we're going to be like, wow, I wish we'd had this, 20 years ago. And so it goes. It just keeps going, you know. When I was a kid, I had all kinds of things that I'm sure kids from the 20s would have loved to have, like bread. Anyway, here's Earthbound in the now playing section, the quick reviews. We got Earthbound. Let's see what kind of score it got. Earthbound, pluses, great story, fun graphics, good sound effects. Negatives, frequent, sometimes tedious battles. Poorly designed inventory system. Limits how many items you can carry. Earthbound comes packaged complete with Identa-Smell scratch and sniff cards and a Nintendo Power Player's Guide to help you through the toughest standoffs. What you also get in Earthbound is 40 or more hours of inventive RPG action with a party of up to 4 young teens who must save the world from an alien who has taken over much of the planet. Gygus, the alien, infects the minds of the people and animals, whom you must then fight and tame. That's true, when you defeat enemies in Earthbound, you don't kill them or defeat them or knock them out. They become tame, which I've never seen another game do that. It's like, that's awesome. Your enemies become tame, and everybody's happy. Here we've got Packy and Marlin for the Super NES. Packy and Marlin teach the important facts about living with diabetes. 2 fun-loving elephants treat... Wait, what? This is when the Super NES was getting a lot of medically themed games. There was also Dr. Novalin, who I think he would fight antibodies in your system or something like that. I don't know. They were getting just health themed games. There was a game where you clean teeth or something. You blasted plaque. I don't know. it was an odd time, but you know, hey, I mean, maybe these games were good for kids, you know, I don't know. Finally, the Nintendo Ultra 64 unveiled. This is actually what the system ended up looking like. So they didn't change the design, they just changed the name. But hey, it was worth it when it finally arrived, because Mario 64 is still one of the best games of all time. One of the best platform games of all time. It basically showed all other three-dimensional platform games how it's done. So, good stuff. Setting the bar high right off the bat for the 3D era. 1995 though, banner year for Nintendo. And this actually might be one of the weaker issues from 1995, and it's still a tremendous issue. So thank you for joining me for another Nintendo Power Review. Really appreciate you being here. Like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.